Hi, this is Dan Bullard, retired electronics engineer, sitting on the front seat of my houseboat again. Hopefully nobody's come along. There's a train coming though, you can barely hear it out there. I want to talk about a few things. One thing was really interesting. In that last video I did, Law 1, Law 2, fantastic stuff. But when you're working in, I don't know what that is. When you're working in complex format, and you're going to do an inverse FFT, there's a number of ways to go. You can do an FFT and then you can work in complex, or you can convert it from rectangular into polar, and then you can fool with the amplitudes and the phases separately. Now, that kind of works in some cases. You got to be really careful though. So I prefer to stay away from doing that. It's dangerous, and I've had trouble with filters in that regard. It's better to do things in rectangular format, and so you're going to have to get used to it. Now, in those cases where I was multiplying the harmonics by 2, by 4, by 8, by 16, by -2, -4, -8, -16, you have to take the multiplier and take the square root of it and put each half into, so the square root of 2, 1.414, 1.414. Put them into each of the two parts of the real and imaginary. So you have to do real times 1.414 and imaginary times 1.414. Now, you have to do the square root because in the end they're going to get multiplied by each other, and so 1.414 times 1.414 is 2. So that'll work out for you. But if it's -2, you have to get rid of the minus sign because you can't take the square root of -2. Another thing I want to talk about, and I know you're here to learn stuff, but I want to tell you about my time at Tektronix a little bit. I was retired. I retired in the end of 2008 because Obama was coming in and I was sure he was going to raise taxes and stuff, and so I decided, get out of my high-paying job, don't let him tax me, and I bailed on the workplace thing. I did a shrug. But in the end, I needed to add that third pontoon on this boat. I needed to add the third pontoon down the center, and so I needed money for that. And I had money, but I didn't have enough to do the third pontoon and all that stuff. The third pontoon was $11,000, boom, out the door, and I had to get it trucked across from Tennessee to here, so that cost me another $8,000, $10,000. So I needed money. So I took a job with Tektronix. I found a job on LinkedIn and found a test engineering job at Tektronix. And yeah, here comes the train. So I wasn't really up to, I had done the semicons. I was a big player in Credence, big player, and Nexus too. And I was doing some great stuff. But I would take, at that point, especially because the economy was very depressed, I would take whatever I could get, and I got this job for test engineering. And I did. I showed you the picture of me in front of the Teradyne A585. That was the highest end tester I used there at Tektronix. Most of them were the BTS, and most of them were like cobbled together Tektronix crap that they put together with scopes and spectrum analyzers and signal generators and all kinds of garbage. Oh my God, HP 3458s. Just tons of garbage, and that's stuff that Raytheon was using. It was amazing that they even had an A585, and I was very grateful to be able to use an A585. Trust me, because everything else they had was garbage, like that other guy that has all that wall full of equipment. That was at Tektronix. Tektronix was so backwards. And Raytheon too, very backwards, they didn't know the first thing about electronics, period. They could fake it, you know. But they were nice guys. When I was in Dallas, I had to travel to Dallas. I mean, that was the thing. I got hired, and then I was immediately sent out to Dallas to work with the Raytheon people. And there I met Melanie. And Melanie, like, you need to read my book, The Reluctant Road Warrior. Melanie ripped into Brian Brokaw, who was my boss. She ripped into him on day 2, I think. I mean, just ripped him to shreds. And he admitted to me that he had almost become an alcoholic the first time he went to Dallas, because Tektronix was buying the test business for those parts from Raytheon. Raytheon was making the chips for the F-16, for the Trident missile, blah, blah, blah. They were testing them, but it was too expensive, and they bluffed too many times, so the government said, okay, go find another vendor. So they found Tektronix. It had to be in the States. There's the train. Cutting my wife off, she's off shopping. So Tektronix bought the business, and so they had a special place on the campus for that kind of thing. And so Raytheon, we flew out there and we worked with Raytheon for 3 weeks, and it was okay, it was all right. I had a nice trip to Bullard, Texas. Got to see Bullard, Texas, and take pictures all over the place. It was fun. Nobody lives there, and I couldn't convince my wife to move there. But Tektronix was kind of fun for a while. I was working at Tektronix in Beaverton, trying to get these things up, all these test programs for the F-16 and everything else. And my wife visited me at Tektronix, and here's a nice picture of her. That's April. She visited me at Tektronix. I kind of liked the Tektronix campus. It was kind of fun. I would sit in meetings. We would have meetings with them on Mondays, and I tried to avoid them for a while, but I finally had to go. Brian says, oh, you need to go. Okay, fine. So we're sitting in the meetings, and when Melanie found out I was in the meetings, she'd be texting me, and she'd say stuff like, can you believe he said that? I'm like, yeah, I know, it's kind of bullshit, huh? We had a good time talking back and forth, you know. So Melanie's in the meeting talking to everybody else, and she's talking to me by message, and so it was funny as hell. But when Melanie brought the whole crew up here to work on stuff, I got her Melanies Manor, which I showed you a picture of. Somebody else organized it, but from then on I took care of it. So that was really fun. And I would take her to the cafeteria, and she'd get to see some other people that she worked with at Tektronix. It was kind of fun. It was really fun to be on Melanie's good side. Brian hated her. I decided we'd go on a Portland Spirit cruise because the Dallas people needed some recreation, and it wasn't fair that they just end the day at 5 o'clock and then go sit in their hotel rooms. So I says, hey, let's go on the Portland Spirit. And so I organized a trip to the Portland Spirit, and here we are getting ready to get on the Portland Spirit and go cruise up and down the Willamette. It was fun. It was really fun. It's a great, great trip. And here's all the crew, including my wife, myself, Melanie's there, and my boss. Brian refused to go. He says, I don't even want to spend my free time on a boat with Melanie, ever. Don't want anything to do with Melanie. So he just, like I said, he hated her guts. So but my boss liked Melanie. I mean, he didn't know what to make of her, but with me introducing him and getting him into talking to her, he loved her. He thought she was great. So there he is. He went on the cruise with us, and we had this dinner on the Portland Spirit, and we had a great time, Here I am. Here's a picture of me in my suit. In order to work at Tektronix, you had to follow their procedures, and one of their procedures was when you hooked up liquid nitrogen, there was always a possibility it might spray on you and freeze you to death, kill you, or hurt you. So when I hooked up liquid nitrogen, and I ended up, I went from semicon to pushing bottles of liquid nitrogen down the hallway. It was quite a demotion, but You know, Trump says if you give up your work and retire too early, you're going to end up regretting it, and I did. So that's true. But we went on a number of trips. We did the other trip on the Stern Wheeler up to Cascade Locks, and so me and Melanie and a bunch of people went up there, and we had a good time on the Stern Wheeler Cascade Locks. 3 or 4 of the guys ended up coming late, but the boat held departing Cascade Locks so that they could get on board. We had a good time cruising Cascade Locks, and it was really fun. And then it turned out Melanie lost her wallet in my car, and so Melanie got a hold of me and said, "Hey, my wallet's missing." I said, "I know, I found the back of my car." So I said, "It's the weekend." I says, "You know, you could always come down and get your wallet, you know, I'm right out here. You can come out here and take a ride on my boat and stuff." So her and the crew came out, well, some of the crew came out, and here they are. This is a place where they took film from Twilight, the movie. And so I took a picture of them in front of this spot that was also highlighted in the movie Twilight. So there's Melanie and the two of the guys in there. So we took them on a boat ride out in the river, and wow, they really got to look at how I lived. You know, it's kind of fun. In the end, I had a really, really good time with Melanie. She was great. But Brian approached me one day and said, "Okay, come with me. HR wants to see you." And they laid me off. And Brian, in the end of the day, when I had to go back, I had to leave and then go back and get my stuff out of my office. And Brian's like, "You've been through this before, right?" I'm like, "No, Brian, I've never been laid off in my life. This is my first layoff ever." And I'm like, 60 years old. I've never been laid off in my life, So he assumed everybody been laid off, But I took it pretty personally, And then in the end, Melanie tried to get me to come back. She tried to convince them to hire me back because she really liked me. And we ended up having a conversation on text. In the end, they couldn't do it. They wouldn't do it. But then, for one of the parts, for the Javelin Missile, I forget what it was, for one of the parts, they wanted me to help them. And I said, "Okay, I'll help you for $200 an hour." And that's the last I ever heard of them. So, I was working for Applecos for $100 an hour. Why not ask Teradyne or Tektronix, who had laid me off, for $200 an hour? I can do that. And they wouldn't bite. So, in the end, my strategy, which was very cool, it was for a voltage regulator for the Javelin Missile. Yeah, it's for the Javelin Missile. When the Javelin Missile lights up, the engine lights up, it gets its electricity from the heat from the thermocouple from the rocket engine. And so it doesn't have any brains until you pull the trigger and it starts firing the missile. So suddenly the thing has to boot up and come to life and go, "Where am I going?" It was pretty funny. So it was for a voltage regulator, and they couldn't get it to work. And I had a solution, but they couldn't get it to work. So I don't know what they did after that, but they refused to pay me the $200 an hour. I'm worth far more. I mean, I wouldn't work for anybody now, but I'm working for you. That's about it. That's all I can handle right now. Anyway, my time at Tektronix, I think I worked from March through October, and then they laid me off, and I said, "Okay, fine, I'm going to the river." And we took off in the houseboat, and we parked the south end near Caterpillar Island, and we had a wonderful time. So I got the money I needed to get the center pontoon installed. We did great. We did fantastic. Got enough money, put money in the bank. I mean, I got paid big bucks. Big bucks. I got Tektronix to pay me big bucks. So I ended up with a bunch of money and had a good time. Had health care for like 2 months, and then boom, it was gone. But didn't need it, don't need it, don't want it. It was fun. So if you have to work for somebody, just be aware they could throw you out at a moment's notice, even though you're doing great stuff. I mean, I was the only person at Tektronix who had a good relationship with Melanie. And my boss was too. He followed my lead. My boss's boss. My boss, Brian Brokaw, he hated her guts. He wouldn't have anything to do with her. So me and Melanie had a great time. Me and some of the guys there, the Raytheon guys, the Tektronix guys were like, they weren't so great. But me and Melanie had a great time. So, I don't know, try to be friendly with everybody you work with. And if they're jerks, well, there it is, forget about it. Anyway, so once again from the river, the Stambler.